So Henrik Lundqvist is pretty good. The New York Rangers have won the Eastern Conference Finals, sending them to the Stanley Cup Finals 2014 after beating the Montreal Canadiens in just 6 games. Game 6 would be a 1-0 victory for the New York Rangers, and it would be a battle of the goalies, with one goalie almost doubling the amount of saves that the other goalie had to make. And when you think of a goalie having to double the other amount of saves, you normally think of that goalie being Henrik Lundqvist. But I'm going to take a minute here to try and defend Dustin Kotarski. I'm going to defend you, Dustin. Carey Price might have stolen a game for the Montreal Canadiens if he was playing, but Dustin Kotarski did not lose Montreal a game. In fact, he did steal them their first win of this series. He could have done nothing more coming in. Anyone that was blaming Kotarski for the Canadiens' loss is just wrong. The Canadiens had 18 shots on goal in the last game of the season. This game was to save their lives, and they only got 18 shots. That's not good enough. Derek Brassard had 5. Derek Brassard equated for 25% the amount of shots that the Canadiens had by himself. Just not good enough, especially when you're coming up against Henrik Lundqvist, who for my money should win the Conn Smythe, providing that the Rangers don't get swept in the finals. If they take it to 6 or above and Lundqvist continues his play, he will win the Conn Smythe. Has there been a better goalie in the NHL than Henrik Lundqvist? Consistently? I think it's been about 9 years now. It's his 9th year in a year. 9th year in a year. It has been his 9th year in the league, and you got to say over those 9 years, he probably is the best goalie over that time period. He made one of the best reflex stops midway through the second period on a deflected puck from the stick of Dan Girardi, basically willing himself to get to the puck, and when there's a will, there's a way. One of the best saves of the players. And did you see Dan Girardi after the play? And I know this is not the way that Dan Girardi handed Henrik Lundqvist to stick back, but you can just imagine him doing it like this. Thank you, my liege. Henrik Lundqvist is the king of the New York Rangers. If they win the Stanley Cup, he should probably lift it as the captain of his team. I can kind of understand Martin St. Louis doing it, but Henrik Lundqvist should be lifting that cup first. I'm thoroughly looking forward to watching Henrik Lundqvist in a Stanley Cup final. I hope it goes to 7. I hope each game is 3-2. And I hope that the Rangers lose, because quite frankly the Kings of the Blackhawks are the better team, although it would be fantastic to see Henrik Lundqvist win a cup. 10-second preview of Game 6 of the Kings Blackhawks tonight. 10-second previews are going to work, as I'm going to give you the winner of the game, the final score, and the player of the game. 4-2 Kings. Quick first star. Gabriel Kopitar gets on the score sheet. Taves gets on the score sheet for Chicago. Brandon Saad gets 2 assists, and the Bat 70s line contributes a goal as well. Now that we've got all the playoffs talk out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about something that's completely non-related to the playoffs. The Florida Panthers have got the first overall pick in this year's NHL entry draft after winning the NHL lottery. Yesterday I did the Washington Capitals 5 steps to making the playoffs. Today is going to be a little bit more tricky because the Florida Panthers are a lot further away from making the playoffs than the Washington Capitals. And if they make some smart moves, they do have Roberto Luongo in there, which is going to help a heck of a lot. They can get into playoff contention. If they don't make the playoffs, they can have a lot better season and end up around 9th or 8th. So they could still make the playoffs, but I'm not as confident in this as I am for the Washington Capitals, because the owners seem more willing to spend money than some teams, but they have a lot of cap space, and I don't know how much free agents will want to come here, so it's kind of harder to think of a sign Vanek to come and play in Florida. He spent a lot of years in Buffalo, probably doesn't want to go to another rebuilding team. He'll want to go to a contender. Same with Gabrick, same with Camilleri. Do have money to offer the contracts for some players though, but let's just deal with these 5 steps before I start rambling on too much. The first step is to sign their younger players, and in fact everyone, to better contracts. If you go onto capdeep.com and search for the Florida Panthers, you will see that the only person signed for 2 more years is Roberto Luongo on that ridiculous contract. That is not a good way to build a cup contender. The only 2 forwards that they currently have on the roster that have contracts past next season are Andrei Barkov and Brad Boyce. The rest of them all expire. They need to sign people like Huberdeau, Barkov, and Nick Budstad to better contracts now, and then build around them rather than having to worry about bringing free agents in every year. The second thing they can do is again deal with the salary cap. They haven't used any of their compliance with buyouts, so they should try and either buy out 2 or even just one of the following 3 players. Ed Jovanovski should be brought out of his $4 million contract for the next year. Brian Campbell could be brought out of his $7 million contract. Or I would buy out Brad Boyce just to free up an extra $2 million that you can spend on a free agent. And their play is declining. The $4 million that Ed Jovanovski is currently earning to a potential free agent is a better use of that money than giving it to Ed Jovanovski, as much as he may be loved in Florida. And it's a compliance buyout as well, so it works for everyone. Going back to the first point, because Florida haven't really managed their contracts very well, they all seem to expire at the same time. They have a lot of free agents. Dmitry Kulikov and Eric Branson need to be re-signed. Both of them are restricted free agents, so it shouldn't be too bad. But you need to bring those 2 back. If you are hypothetically going to buy out Campbell or Jovanovski, you need that defensive depth. And I think those 2 are decent young defenders with potential that you should try and keep on your team. Most of the other free agents you can let walk. There is no one really worth holding on to. Viv is hard for Florida to attract free agents. The weather is lovely. They have lots of cap space, so players can demand for a little bit more. And they do have Barkov and Huberdeau in which to build around, which is not a bad 2 to build around at all. Things are looking up in Florida, but there's a long way to look. Number 4 is to decide what to do with the first overall pick. A lot of rumours going around that the Panthers are open to trading away the first overall pick, and I do not have a problem with that as long as you manage to stay within the top 10 overall. Although it's meant to be a weaker draft, there is still lots of good talent in the top 10 that can be a productive player. If you do not think that Aaron Ekblad is all that is up to be, or you do not want to draft Aaron Ekblad, you should trade out of that top spot and go with one of his centers. Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Michael DeCole, plug someone that I used to play with as well, one who lived here in the UK, Brandon Pellini. Seriously though, I played roller hockey with him when I was 14 and he was 12. My goodness, he was making grown men look silly then. It's a shame that Great Britain doesn't really use him for the junior prospects, but he's probably making a wise career decision not playing for Britain at the moment. Not even sure he can, to be honest. His parents are Canadian. He was born in Britain, played in Canada for the last few years. So technically, I don't think he's eligible to play. He is ours, and we're taking it. We're claiming it. Him and Brian Defoe, the most successful people to be born in England to play in the NHL. Slightly off topic with that, you address Ekblad. Do not do what the Oilers have done and go 3 forwards all the time. You do need defence to make the playoffs. 3 teams that are left still playing hockey out in this summer. 3 of the best defensive cores that you have in the game. Speaking of learning from the Edmonton Oilers' mistake, there is a rumour going around that the Edmonton Oilers are trying to move up into that first overall pick to draft Aaron Ekblad, which would be their 4th first overall pick in the last 5 years. Swapping places with Edmonton in the first round would result in the Florida Panthers getting the number 3 pick, which is absolutely fine because Aaron Ekblad will go in the top 3, so you're going to be left with either Sam Reinhart or Sam Bennett or even Leon Drexel or some of the mentioned players before, which is fine for the number 3 pick. The other part of that trade was a winger from Edmonton. Apparently now Yakupov is the higher asking price. I feel picking up Perron and a top 3 pick is worth trading that first overall pick for. The 5th and final thing the Florida Panthers can do to try and make the purse this year, make wise free agent purchases. First free agent they should go after is Matt Niskanen. Matt Niskanen, I think, is the best defenseman that's going to be available for free agency. Be a better Brian Campbell now than Brian Campbell is at the moment. Andre Mazaris is the second player that I should target in free agency. If they fail to get Matt Niskanen to go after Mazaris, is a bigger body defenseman, completely different type of defenseman, but I feel he would still be very effective in Florida. The player they get is Nikita. Nikitin is a very underrated player. Nikitin. He's a very good player. Columbus, a good plus minus. Choose time, nothing spectacular. Very good year for Columbus, and I feel he can do it again in Florida if he's given a decent D partner, which is why you bring in Niskanen or Mazaris. Steve Downey, I think a little bit more grit's needed in Florida. Steve Downey can help score, and he's a pest. Used to like to throw rats on the ice. Throw one on now. Mason Raymond. Again, I think Downey and Raymond could come in together. After those wheels just keep on churning. Those are the 5 things I think the Florida Panthers need to do this off-season if they have a chance of making the playoffs, which I still don't think they would. At least not for 2014-2015. Maybe for 2015-2016 they will then become playoff contenders. Please do let me know what you think. It's always interesting to hear other people's opinions. It's interesting to be told why I'm wrong and why I'm wrong. At most, there are only 9 games of NHL hockey left in the summer until October. It's a bit of a sad thought, isn't it? So I encourage you to embrace and enjoy it. Unfortunately, in the UK, the entire Stanley Cup final is going to be blacked out because of a pay-per-view channel, called Premier Sports, despite the fact I have paid my £100 for my yearly subscription of Game Centre. I cannot watch the games. I cannot legally in this country on Game Centre or Premier Sports. I must be watching some crappy feed on my laptop, but I will still be there. None of the games are going to start before 2 o'clock in the morning here, and if we go to LA, I'm going to have to wait until 3 o'clock in the morning to watch some of it. I'm going to do it. There's 9 games left of Stanley Cup hockey, and I am going to soak it in, and I encourage you guys to do the same, because in about 3 weeks time you're going to have to wait another 4 months until we get NHL hockey. It's always nice talking in the off season, but eventually you just end up repeating yourself. It's not the same. So enjoy the last 20 or so days of NHL hockey. If you are lucky enough to still have a team in the contenders, I wish your team the best of luck. If you are a neutral, how good have these playoffs been? Thank you again very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.